Hello everybody, this is Josh. I've recently come into possession of a old style drill press from the 80s. I mentioned to my father that I didn't have a drill press and I could have used one for a project, and he said, well, I have your grandfather's old one, so you can have that. After receiving it, I decided to clean it up a bit. One of the cool things about this drill press is that it was given to my grandfather for 28 years of service to a hospital, I believe, in the maintenance department as a mechanic. And, I just think that it really deserves a good cleanup, deserves to be used, and I'm really happy that I can actually have it. The thing is, this isn't going to be a restore video. This doesn't really need to be restored. It's not in a broken state. It worked perfectly fine. All of the things that I'm doing to it are really just surface level. Cleaning up the rust, washing it off, redoing some of the grease. Nothing is wrong with the drill press though, and it actually came apart very easily. So I first started by taking all the pieces apart, and I used a combination of vinegar and WD-40 rust removal to clean up some of the parts. So I left some of the parts in vinegar that could fit, and then for parts like this one, I sprayed them with WD-40, wire brushed, and in some cases sanded a little bit for the small. Some components had sawdust mixed with the grease, or just worn out over time and were harder to move, like the gears in this box here. Other parts just simply had grease that sort of looked like rust, but it was just really grimy grease that was stuck on. And then you had the chuck, which had rust all over it, making it a bit difficult to turn by hand. And just some more grease and older grease and grime needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Chip paint here and there. This was the table after the vinegar was done with it. I let it do most of the work just in an oil pan. I then sanded it and the stand as well to get a lot of that rust off. It took a lot of hand effort, and this would have been a lot easier with a grinder. Here are the levers used to lock the table in place after being in vinegar as well as sanding. It took off all of the black coating. These will rust very quick. And here is a lot of the other components that have been removed of rust as well, using the vinegar, or in some cases a mix of vinegar and trying to use WD-40 to scrub it off. I plan to either blue or nickel plate these components to prevent the rust. They started rusting pretty much instantly after I cleaned them off, so I had to do that pretty quick. As for the paint, I don't have the exact paint to redo these, so I just mixed up some really basic model paint to cover up some of the rust spots. I would want this to be the exact color if I were to ever redo it completely, and I'd have to strip all the paint off. But you can see these are before and after clips of applying the paint. From a distance, you can't really tell. You can tell more on the top, but I find it does look a lot better than big brown rust spots. Then I used some files to straighten up some of the slots to make them more square. You can see between here and here, more square and more circular. They were just off by a little bit, not too bad. Learned how to do some nickel anodizing, nickel plating. Here's some before and afters, comparing the nuts and levers, as well as some of the bolts to hold in the base. Very shiny, very nice. And the chuck. I think it turned out pretty good for my first time. Had to strip off a lot of the grease off the shaft here, and polished it, sanded it, and it looks pretty nice. going to use this Teflon lubricant on it so that it's dry and dust doesn't get stuck to it as much as the grease previously. Alright, so here's the cleaned up drill press. As you saw throughout this video, all the individual pieces, but here's it finally assembled. I've used it a few times. The light makes the paint look a bit worse on top, but if you're in the normal light, it helps cover up some of the scratches. Like, it did look worse in my opinion with brown marks on it for the rust stains. As I said earlier in the video, I'm not going to repaint this. I like the color that it is. I like the original color. If I were to ever repaint this, I'd have to do it in full, take the whole thing apart, strip all the paint. It would be a lot of work, and it doesn't need it. So I just touched it up where it just had a lot of surface blemishes, so that it looks a bit nicer. Like, there was some nicks and scratches on this. The things on the top, obviously, nicks and scratches on this. On the base, there were a lot of marks, and you can barely see them now. Like, the color doesn't exactly match, but it hides it from a good distance, so that's pretty good. I did spray paint some of the bottom areas, like underneath here is black. I spray painted that black. It was red originally, but you never see it. I just did that so that the rust and crustiness wouldn't come down. I scraped it off and painted that. Repainted this handle black because it had quite a few nicks and scratches on it as well, and the surface here as well, that's black. You saw the progress of this. Very rusty, very rusty. Clean that up. It looks like there was some welding done here, something was done on here, and I can't quite get that off. Again, I've mentioned before, if I had a grinder, maybe I could use that to sand these better than just by hand. I've got a drill bit in the chuck right now. These were polished. Let me just get the light on this. So you can see if I get in a bit closer, it's a lot cleaner than it was. Some of the spots that looked like rust were not actually rust. They were actually just the grease from inside coming out and gumming up and getting really thick on there. So when you see the pictures of this component and what looks like rust, it's not actually rust. This shaft here, I polished that up. Now it's got, you can see the white at the bottom, that's actually Teflon lubricant. So it's dry, so that if no sawdust will get stuck to that. And this was severely stained with grease as well. So now it shouldn't get stained, or if it does, it'll be with white, and I'll be able to clean that off fairly easily. This was cleaned up a bit. It was also stained. It still has a few stains in some gear slots, but not as bad. This ring here actually wasn't in the right spot. If we flip back to the original picture, when I got this, the ring was up at the top here. When I assembled this, I put it back at the top as well. When I assembled it, I thought for some reason that it would hold this up, but it made no sense because this sits right on the top of the circle. So I put it there and I was like, oh, that's really unusual. And then it clicked in my head, oh, that's supposed to hold the gear strip down. You saw that these are now nickel plated. There's another one on this side underneath here for tightening up the table. So I think this looks very nice, nickel plated. Other parts that are nickel plated. Bring the light around again, just so we can get a view around here. These pieces are nickel plated. Again, there was a bit of gunk on here, but it was just gunk from inside, right? It wasn't actually rust on these parts. Now the plate inside here was actually rusted a bit. I found that there was actually some rust where there probably shouldn't have been, like the grease inside here. So you'd think the quill itself wouldn't have had any rust on it. It had a few patches, so I just cleaned that off, and now being re-greased as I did, I had reassembled it, that should take care of it for a while. So I did take away a lot of the rust on here and on here, and this moves a lot better now. I can actually move it by hand. Before it would have a few parts where it would bind up, but I cleaned inside and sprayed it out with WD-40 and whatnot, and then in the end I cleaned it out again and I sprayed some of the Teflon lubricant up inside as well, and that seems to work really nicely. So one last thing I'll just show, I guess, is the inside here. So right now I've got it on the middle gear. I actually replaced the belt. It didn't need to be replaced. I was stupid and misplaced it and couldn't find it for a while. I need to vacuum out in here. The new belt's breaking in and shedding a little bit. But there was nothing to do in here. This was perfectly pristine. I mean, the paint's all good. Still has the original sticker with the gear ratios or pulley ratios in it. And yeah, it's all good. So I guess I'll just start it up and you can hear it go. So let's start this. So it's not too loud. Actually, I should have taken a video of it beforehand. When I got it, there was a humming noise when you would pull this all the way down. It like sounded like it would hum and suck as it went down, and I think it was the bearings or something that was off. I did put oil into the bearings, as I might mentioned previously, so I think that might have gotten rid of it. The only thing left to do now is to drill some things and show you what it can drill. Wood. Steel. And the real reason anybody gets a drill press, drilling cheese. Oh yeah. So the last thing, the last thing in this video would just be to summarize what I might use this drill press for. So I've already used it, aside from drilling cheese and just a random hole in the chair leg. Just to note too, this was clamped down when I was doing it, so safety first. You might have seen my hand in the frame a bit, but that was just to stabilize it a bit more for the drill. That being said, I'm going to need to print a few parts for it to complement it. I want to print some V-clamps. I'm going to use a combination of threaded rod that I have extra from the printer and maybe build some different clamping systems so that I can mount things on here easily. I've seen some stuff online that I like that I might try to emulate. I might print a cap for this. I might print what I really want is a drill bit, a case or a drill bit shelf. I have random drill bits, but they're all just in a box. I don't really have them organized. So what I want to do is create some sort of shelf that connects to here, and you can put different boxes on it, but it has to be small enough so it doesn't get in the way of anything you'd want to work with, but big enough to hold a few things and be out of the way of any mechanisms. So I might do that. The other thing is this chuck, which I also nickel plated. This chuck was originally on a wire. My dad had it here so that he didn't lose it, and I better do that soon so I don't lose it. I'm thinking of getting a different chain for it maybe, and also creating a mount for it to hold, probably in the same place where those drill bits would go. I've already used this for Chairboy actually. I just got some new threaded rods, or not threaded rods, lead screws in the mail, and I want to try them out, but they are a bit too long for Chairboy. If you look at the design, just step over here, Chairboy's partly disassembled. These lead screws go up too high, right into the chair. So I used the drill press to drill these holes out. Now, of course, I've drilled holes in my chair rods before using just a hand drill, but the problem with that is bigger holes are harder, it's less safe. This is definitely easier. So I used it to drill out those two top holes. It was very easy to do. Yeah, so I might just 3D print some attachments for it, use it in some of these 3D printing projects. One day I'm going to try to make a CNC machine, and I think it'll come in handy then when, you know, building the frame for that out of metal. So, you know, definitely find some uses for it. You might see it in some of my videos if I start doing some videos where I show some stuff off, where I'm actually doing things in the video. Right now, I'm a bit too embarrassed to show me doing anything because it usually takes me a few attempts to either assemble things or build things, so I tend to just show the finished product. Anyways, if you have any comments, any suggestions on projects I could do with this machine, any suggestions on attachments I could print for it or make for it, let me know in the comments. Thank you.